coming up, the rest of this episode just about is an interview that I did with Ed O'Brien 6 weeks ago.
Wow.
And as people say all the time, 6 weeks ago feels like another universe. I don't know if I totally buy that, but I get what people are saying when they're like, holy 6 weeks ago, man. Even 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that was a totally different world. Yeah, I mean, maybe I still am just holding on to some sort of misplaced optimism about what the future will be like, but I'm kind of like, yeah, obviously there wasn't a quarantine then, but of course, this is different now. But anyway, so in some ways it was a very long time ago. Jake, how familiar are you with Ed O'Brien?
I'm pretty familiar with him. He's the bass player in Radiohead, right?
Well, you're not that familiar with him, Jake, because he's a guitarist in Radiohead.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Sorry, I'm not trying to shame you, but he's a guitarist.
He and Johnny Greenwood are the guitarists.
Yeah, I guess in like an old school band way, he's more of the rhythm guitarist, but maybe it's not even true.
He's just playing bar chords while Johnny Greenwood shreds solos over them.
But they're not like a metal band, so I'm sure like...
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Who's the bass player in Radiohead? Who am I thinking of?
Colin Greenwood. He's Johnny's brother.
Right. And then you got Phil Selway on drums.
Yeah. One thing about Ed that's cool is that in the context of Radiohead, his name sounds very Radioheady, but like if it was like a guy from Jersey, he's the guy whose name could be a guy from like the East Coast, like a Jersey guy, Ed O'Brien.
Totally.
Oh yeah, Ed O'Brien. Like yeah, he played hockey at St. Dominic's or something.
He runs a body shop, doesn't he, down in Bayonne?
Yeah, Ed O'Brien. He's a Boston guy. Yeah, I got this cousin, Ed O'Brien. Anyway, but Ed is a very elegant man, very talented guy. And so I got a call about 6 weeks ago saying, hey, Ed's in town. He's doing some press for his first solo album, which, he's been playing with Radiohead for decades. So this is a big deal. His first solo album, it's under the name EOB, essentially Ed O'Brien. Cool. And I said, would you want to interview him? And I said, yeah, hell yeah. And I've met Ed before, and I always thought he was like a cool guy. So it came together very last minute, and we didn't have access to the studio. So it turned into a thing where I basically interviewed him in my backyard.
In person?
In person, yeah. Since this interview was recorded, apparently Ed got coronavirus. Sounds like he's doing okay, but it's interesting because we talked quite a bit about health and eating and stuff. Because I basically, going into the interview, I was like, I think when somebody comes on crisis, I like to ask them about, time crisis topics to get the ball rolling, as I did with Jerry Saltz a little bit. But so with Ed, I was like, I want to hear about, and even before he came in, I was like, just so Ed knows, the things we talk about on the show, we don't always do like hardcore interviews, like, so what's going on with you, And they're like, no, that's cool. And I was like, all right, I'll probably ask him about the Grateful Dead. And they wrote back like, yeah, well, Ed actually is more into fish. And I was like, even better. I can't wait to hear about this. But I knew I was going to ask him about, Flamin' Hot Cheetos and things like that. And that led to a whole discussion about health and some of his struggles over the years. So I hope that his bout with coronavirus, COVID-19, wasn't too terrible. But it sounds like he's doing well. So that's good. But anyway, this is my backyard interview with Ed O'Brien from 6 weeks ago. And you should check out his album.
We were just talking about the last time we saw each other. It was at let me say it correctly, Glastonbury.
Yes.
How do you say it?
Glastonbury, what do you say? Glastonbury.
Americans, it's very tempting for us to say Glastonbury.
You can say Glastonbury, because we've got enough American acts like yourselves who've come over and played it. Hey, Glastonbury.
It sounds wrong, but it doesn't feel right to say Glastonbury. Does that sound correct?
That sounds great.
When I say that, Glastonbury?
Perfect.
Glastonbury.
Yeah, Glastonbury.
So it was interesting the time that I saw you, because at this point, Vampire Weekend's played 4 times. How many times is Radiohead?
5?
5,
yeah.
Oh, so we're actually neck and neck. I thought it'd be more of a disparity. But the time I saw you was the only time I've ever gone as a punter, as English people say, just to check it out.
Yeah.
And I had a great time. And I saw you, and you go every year.
Yeah.
Is it as a punter, or is it weird to call an adult a punter?
No, punter's perfect.
So you go as a punter?
I go as a punter, and I've been sort of, the first one I went to was in 1990 as a punter. Mm-hmm. Well, the band weren't signed, we had the band. And sort of, I guess since then, most years, I've kind of gone as a punter, whether we play or not. And in fact, I actually prefer it when we don't play, because for me and my wife and our friends, it's our carnival. We've got kids and we live sort of lives that are quite busy and organised and a very London life. So Glastonbury gives us a place to literally go out and play, be like kids again.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing. It feels like, I've been talking quite a lot about this recently. It's more than just a festival. There's a power there that you tap into people have been doing this in that part of the country, in Britain, for thousands of years, celebrating essentially midsummer, the solstice. And that's what it taps into. That area of Britain is not far from Stonehenge. It's very old.
Right, and there's Glastonbury Tor.
Exactly.
Is also, what is that, it's a mound?
Yeah, it's a mound with a little castle on top. That whole area where Glastonbury was used to be underwater. And Glastonbury Tor used to be an island.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I guess when the sea levels were higher or something. And there's all this mythology, or not mythology, but all these stories of Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus's uncle, visiting Glastonbury. And apparently there was the reason there was an old trade route from Palestine, the Middle East. There was this trade route that they would come and trade tin in Cornwall because it had tin mines. It was an outpost of the Roman Empire as well. So it was...
Right, because of the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
it's not crazy to imagine somebody from the Middle East could have made it to the British Isles.
Exactly.
Well, like you just said, the first time you went was as a punter, and then you played.
Yeah.
For me, coming from the U.S., I played it with Vampire Weekend 3 times before I went. And, when you play, sometimes you go out and check stuff out. But, like you said, it's such a different feeling. You're stressed out. You've got to perform. You're on to the next thing usually because it's part of a tour.
Yeah.
So to actually spend a full weekend in the mud, hang out all night, not having to worry about my voice or anything, it was really eye-opening because it can be so, bewildering. When you're on tour, you suddenly get pushed out on stage, especially at a festival. You often don't even have a sound check, and you just play and you bounce, and it's like, you have this brief moment where you connect with the people there, but then you're gone and they're there. So to actually see what it's like to just be there, it made me appreciate it so much more.
Yeah, it's so true, because on the touring thing, it's like you're popping your head above ground for an hour or so, an hour and a half, and then you're back down into your own little world, and you're taken on to the next place. And did you find, because I think for us it's always, and you played the Pyramid stage.
Yes.
We played there, so we've done that 3 times now. And each time we play there, it's always like nothing else. It's a bit like, it's so big. There's like this
so
out
big,
of body.
and you're so far from the front row.
Yeah.
I think that must be the furthest stage to front row stretch anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's feels like half a football field or something. So you see pockets of movement and stuff, but it's almost too big to comprehend. Every time we've ever played, I always walk off in a slightly bad mood, and then and I'm willing to trust other people. Like somebody from the label will be like, "Oh man, it was great," and I'll be like, "Yeah, was it?"
Yeah.
And then I'll come back. If I talk to 3 or 4 people, I'll relax and say, "Oh yeah."
We had exactly the same. You come off that stage and you think, we've blown it. First time we played it in '97. It was a torrential year. Like the other stage, the stage was sinking in the mud and all this stuff. It was the biggest thing we'd ever done. OK Computer had just come out.
Oh yeah, wow.
And it was a nightmare. Tom's monitors went, all our monitors went, the lights went, and we couldn't hear. And Tom kept on coming over to me. You go after about the 7th song, he said, "By the way, just to let you know, I'm walking off after the next song."
Yeah.
And it was literally like, let's just do one more song. Let's do Just as the next one. We can do Just.
Yeah.
We can play that, And we came off and we thought we'd blown it. And we were crushed. And like you said, you come off and then people go, Michael Evers said it was one of his favorite Glastonbury sets ever. So,
crazy.
it's weird. You never know at that place. It's because I think you're so far removed from it in a way.
There's no festival or no yearly festival that quite has that Glastonbury mix of old and new and hippie and modern. But the thing that we have in the US that you don't quite have in the UK is jam band culture. And so this is something we kind of ask everybody is, do you listen to the Grateful Dead?
Here's the thing. I don't listen to the Grateful Dead, but I love the jam band culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you do. I had an epiphany with Fish
Yes.
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
2017.
2017,
Okay.
October the 31st, Las Vegas.
Oh, you went to their Halloween show?
Yeah.
Wow.
In the MGM Grand.
Okay, so many questions. I mean, well, okay. So before we get to that,
Yeah.
one thing that's interesting is that, how old are you?
I'm 51.
So you're kind of the same generation as those guys. Fish,
Yeah.
They started in the early 80s.
Yeah.
You guys started under a different name,
Yeah,
late
85.
80s. Oh, 85. So
at
you were
high
actually-
school.
Okay,
we were
so
at
you're-
high school.
So they were they
They're
were
like
in college.
4 or 5 years older.
So you have a lot in common. And then also, both bands came to like true prominence in the 90s.
Yeah.
So you have that in common. So yeah, like we said, jam band culture doesn't exist
No.
in the UK.
No.
You know, the Grateful Dead played there. They probably played in the UK 20 times over the course of 4 decades. But
Exactly.
not really a big deal. But in the 90s, you guys are touring all over the world. Did you have much awareness of Fish then?
No, so here's the thing, and I'll tell you a bit about why I think, you might know this a bit, but in Britain, when I grew up, punk cast such a long shadow, which was anti-jamming and anti all of that, and almost anti-musicianship, which was ridiculous, that last thing, but it's... So anything that was vaguely, like the Grateful Dead, I remember coming across the Grateful Dead, because I traveled around America by Greyhound in 1987. And in the summer of 1987, I end up in Fort Mason Youth Hostel in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And the youth hostel
This
was
is a solo trip?
solo trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I did it with a school friend, my oldest friend. We did it together. And it was great. We went around America with one of those Ameripasses for like 6 months. And it was amazing. I never heard of the Grateful Dead. And then suddenly this youth hostel is...
You literally hadn't heard of the Grateful Dead
No,
in 87.
Well,
Wow.
so I was weaned on, like... We're lucky we had this thing called Top of the Pops, so we had all sorts of music, but Grateful Dead made no impression. So the things that I was into at that stage were the Smiths,
Right.
U2, Echo and the Bunnymen, a bit of early hip hop. But in terms of bands hippies were a dirty word, and I think there was an association with hippies, Grateful Dead being hippies.
Right.
It was reduced to a very simplistic notion of what this band were. So I get to this youth hostel and it was sort of pan-generational and, people in their like 70s and then teenagers my age, all in tie-dyed and like, what's going on? Oh, there's great this Dead concert. And everybody was so nice and it was almost like they were too nice. And I was,
Seemed a bit cult-like.
Well, it's that British thing that, we're so uptight a lot of the time that
Yeah.
we're kind of skeptical of anybody who's really nice and warm and like,
Yeah.
what do they want?
Right.
Would you like to come to Golden Gate Park with us and have it? Well, what do they want from me? Sort of.
Yeah, especially you're a young dude traveling
Yeah.
in a different country. You got to watch your back a little
Yeah,
bit.
we had knives pulled on us and all, but these were genuinely nice people. Anyway, it was Grateful Dead were doing a concert there, so I hadn't really come across them. And then when we were touring in the 90s, we were still... Grateful Dead seemed so sort of removed from... We were into a lot of American bands, but they weren't the Grateful Dead. They were the Pixies. They
Right.
were R.E.M. They were all the great Dinosaur Jr. They
Yeah.
weren't... It was only when I got older and it was somebody we worked with and the amount of touring that we did in America, you start to understand it a bit more. Maybe when you start playing places like the Sheds, right?
Yeah.
And the arenas, and you start realizing the culture of this country and music. And I was saying this the other night, I think American audiences are the most musical in a way because they will go on a journey with you. You don't have to fire out your greatest hits every night. They will go on a musical journey. And if you've got, like on the last Radiohead tour, we would do 2 shows in each city, 2 arenas, and we do a different set list
Yeah, I've
every
looked
night.
at your set list. Yeah,
And they'd be
very different.
different every single night. And that was...
And that was the first time you guys had really committed to that?
Yeah, we'd done sort of different... We always did different sets, but the
Yeah.
idea of playing a different set each night and 2, it was kind of like... That was the awakening to the fact that this is a culture that we can do that in.
You wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing that in the UK or other places?
I guess we would do now, but America is the kind of place that gives you the confidence to try it first
Right,
of all.
I see. So then take me to Halloween
Fish.
2017. You kind of found out about the Dead a little bit
Yeah.
touring, but still not making
Still
a
not.
huge impression.
Yeah.
And then you must have been somewhat aware of Fish.
Yeah.
But even then, in the 90s, they were kind of on their own trip. That's when they were doing their massive festivals by themselves. I wonder how often you guys were even in the same place.
Well, there was a photographer friend called Danny Clinch. Danny is a good friend of Fish's, and he was a friend of ours, right? And he kept on telling me, he said, "Hey, you got to check this out." And also the Bonnaroo thing.
Right.
And we played Bonnaroo in 2006, the Jam Band Festival, when it was a Jam Band Festival, and loved it. We did like a 3-hour set, and it was just like kind of giddy, warm night. And so the Fish concert happened because I got the same management, Corin Capshaw and Red Light. And I was on a road trip with my wife and my kids in the Southwest in that period, 3 years ago, whatever. And Corin said, "Oh, are you in Vegas on the 31st? And we said, "Yeah." So come along to the show.
So you were just planning on going to Vegas just to... Well, we go with the family?
One night, we did the whole Sedona.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did the
Very
whole...
crunchy town.
Yeah, we did Joshua Tree. I love this country. Once you get out of the cities in America, I just think it's the most stunning. And to be in a car, and it was a really great thing for us as a family.
Yeah.
And so we walk into the MGM Grand that evening, and I walk in and I go, "This is pretty extraordinary, the atmosphere." And then they go on and they start playing, and then we see them do Bowie had died that year, so they did the whole of Ziggy Stardust.
Right, and also for people who don't know, this is a long-running Fish tradition that one of their sets on Halloween is their musical costume where they cover an album.
So they've done the White Album. They did Ziggy Stardust our year, and they did it in sequence.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And I'd never been at a gig where you walk in and the vibe, for want of a better word, is warm, welcoming, celebratory, musical. People are high. I'd like, oh my God, I love this. I mean, you've done it, right?
I've been to a couple now, and one thing that always struck me is that, you know, a handful of people have come up and said hi or something at a show like that. And it's very different than if you're at some other show and somebody spots you. They might be like, "Oh, hey, man. Yeah, like, could I get a picture?" Or like, "Yeah, whatever. I like your band." At that show, people said, "Oh, man, it's really cool to see you here."
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you saw me at Glastonbury.
Yeah.
It was kind of a welcoming thing. Not just, "Hey, look at you." It was kind of just like, "I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that you came to this."
Yeah, to experience it.
And I think the vibe is like, I don't have a very long attention span for music. I don't think there's that many shows where I could actually handle being there for more than 3 hours. And there's something about the combination of the music and the crowd and the vibe that makes it easy.
Yeah.
That makes you happy to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and it also, I saw Trey's other band, Trey Anastasio band, and I maybe knew like a third or maybe like half of it. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I used to be the type of person like, I don't want to go see something if I don't know the songs. I'll be bored. And yet I was just like so happy to hang the whole time because it was like the right environment to hear new music and look around, you know?
And it is. I don't know any Fish music, but I would go to a Fish gig every time because I knew nothing, but I'm the same. You want to have something you can hold on to,
And so you and the guys had never met?
No, and I met them. Corin brought me backstage and I met Trey and John and Paige.
They've busted out some Radiohead over the years, haven't they?
I think so. I think they have. And Trey, I was really chuffed because I did this guitar with Fender, this Strat, this Sustainer Strat. And Trey actually used it.
Really?
Like, the only other guitar he's used apparently is the EOB Strat, which
amazing.
But here's the thing. I saw you did a thing in one of the Sunday papers and you did a podcast recommendation. And you,
the one about Fish.
Long May They Run.
Yes. Oh, you listened to it?
Man, I listened
that's
to
awesome.
It's my favorite podcast. I really liked the band before that. Afterwards, I fucking love the band.
I think especially when you're in a band.
Yeah. How brave are they?
Yeah.
They played on the Millennium down in Florida. 90,000 people.
Yeah.
An all-night set. There was nothing in the press, but they just do it. And they do it for their fans, and they do it for the music, and it's just, I was on stage the other night, and because what I'm trying to do with this band that I've got at the moment, I'm trying to do this thing where we have endings that we go to a place, we jam, and I've been directly inspired by what Fish have said about...
Oh, that's tight.
Yeah, about saying they go out there, and it might not happen for 7 or 8 minutes, and it might not even happen that evening, and it might not happen the next evening, but there's that moment of transcendental beauty, magic that can happen one night. And that's what everybody's willing to be bold enough to do that. And Radiohead have never done that.
I'm curious about that.
You know?
So Radiohead, have there ever been songs that you extend or do something different with live, or it's always pretty faithful to the record?
Well, there's Everything in Its Right Place, which is kind of like, it's a track off Kid A.
Sure.
And it's a kind of a...
Because there's there's that live manipulation kind of stuff.
Exactly, all that stuff and sampling. But the Radiohead songs have been, arrangement is such a big part of it.
Sure.
That we don't know how to do it. And all the parts were worked out. Is that the future for you? Because that's the future for me. Because as a musician now, what I'm chasing now is different experiences and new experiences. And that to me feels like the frontier. And I've come from punk and post-punk in the UK, which this is not this is like 2.5, 3 minute songs. But as you get older or whatever, you kind of, I've done that.
Right.
And of course there's a place for those songs, but it's not too dissimilar as well to the thing that I liken it to is a bit like rave and dance culture, that, a DJ back in the day, or I don't know if they still do, I don't know what EDM's like here, but a DJ would respond to the vibe of the audience and the gig. And that to me is the exciting place where there's something happening that night and you try and gauge it and you feel it and you go, okay, I guess it's like musical surfing. We're going to ride this wave. Let's see where this takes us. That's where I'm really interested in. And it's that bit where kind of Fish meets rave.
Totally. And I think that comparison you draw is very apt. And certainly in the US, there's 100% a fan base that enjoys both those things. If you went to a festival that, for lack of a better word, is kind of like a hippie, crunchy festival, 100%. There's electronic music, stuff you'd call EDM, that specifically lives in that world.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely an improvisatory electronic dance music culture that still is influenced by the jam band world.
Yeah.
This is your first album?
Yeah.
Anything else that you had under a different name or that you besides Radiohead?
Yeah, not really. This is the point. I didn't know how to write.
Right.
I didn't know how to write, and I didn't realize I had lots of like little musical motifs, but kind of ridiculously, I don't know why I didn't ever sit down with Tom and say like, how'd you do it?
Right.
Because I think it's probably that pride in bands, and you don't ask for help, or you don't ask for your like. And also, this guy to my left, Tom, been writing songs at school since he was 12. Mm-hmm. And like anything that I started writing, it's like, well, it's not as good as Street Spirit,
Right.
But what
it's a high bar.
But what you didn't realize is the process that took him to get to Street Spirit. So he might present the song in its form like 2 years after he'd started that process. So that for me was...
Right, you're saying the edited finished
Exactly,
right.
Exactly. So that for me was a big thing, finding out. And so I had all these chunks, and I've got cassettes of stuff like back in the 90s around OK Computer, but I didn't know how to fit those chunks together or how to do it.
What was your attitude about that? You've always struck me as a laid-back dude.
Yeah.
Like, was your vibe kind of like, well, all right, is what like sometimes there's people and bands can feel like very like I got to do something else, or is it because you're a laid back dude that you were chill with waiting until you started to like see the feel the right inspiration, or were you just so busy it didn't matter?
I was so busy.
Yeah,
I literally the whole family thing that I wanted to be...
Right, you were on tour in the studio with Radiohead, or you were home being a dad.
I wanted to be a dad, and like I looked towards like, the writer J.G. Ballard.
Sure, yeah.
He raised his kids on his own. I didn't know that. He raised 3 kids, and he would write at night after he put the kids to bed, and he'd make sure that they got off to school, and he'd do all their meals and stuff, and he would write. And I thought that was the noblest thing. Because the story is, most people in our game, it's like the art comes first. I am a fucking artist, and that's rides roughshod over everything.
I think some famously bad parents.
Exactly.
In the music world.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a dad.
I've found, my brief experience as a parent too, it's kind of like with anything. You're always better at doing something whether it's for an afternoon, a morning, a day, a week, to say, this is what I'm doing this week. Because music and creative stuff has a way of like, it's a little bit like when your battery is drained and then you look at your phone and it's like, well, I've had that app open in the background this whole time.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's good. You just got to close it.
Yeah.
And you just get nervous. Do you want to? But, you got to focus on stuff
Here's the
one
thing.
at a time.
Here's the thing, Ezra. I think it's good. I say this to a lot of people. Don't be scared of being a full-time parent, and don't be scared if, like, whilst your children are young, your creative output isn't as big or as great as it was before. Because I believe, like, in the long run, in terms of you feed that humanity back into your music, and that's the most. And there's something very, very humbling about being a parent, because it's the most amazing thing, but it's supremely challenging. For me, it was like, it was like a mirror on all my Achilles heels, all the things, all my weaknesses. And I had to sort my shit out. And it wasn't easy, like that stuff isn't easy, but you have to do it. And being an artist is about feeding that humanity back. What am I trying to say? That humanity is really important. It feeds your art and it nourishes in a way that gives you longevity.
So obviously it's not a coincidence, but it sounds like it perfectly fits your worldview to be releasing your debut album at this juncture.
Yeah, totally.
With kids in their teens and, having toured all around the world with this other band.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the moment. Now's
and
the
so
time.
many things like on the experiences or influences on the record have been because, so one might be reading a book. I read this amazing book to our kids by a writer called William Nicholson, which is a trilogy called the Wind on Fire trilogy. It's extraordinary. It's sort of, do you know the Philip Pullman books? And
yes, like Golden Compass.
Yeah,
it's that vibe.
It's like that. It's like, it's Lord of the Rings. And I think he got an Oscar for it. He wrote the screenplay to Gladiator.
Oh, okay.
He's a British,
sure.
but he wrote this incredible book that when I was reading it, I was in tears. In the third one, it's this family and it's in a sort of another world. But that informs one of the songs. Another time was I taking the kids down to the IMAX, 10:30 in the morning, to go and see this film about that NASA did on the recommissioning of the space shuttle, to go and see when they fixed the Hubble telescope. That afternoon, I was so inspired. I went back and a song came out. So it's, for me, to put my place, rather than go like to shut myself off and go like, right now I have to create. Certainly there are times you have to do that, but to be fluid and to allow that kind of cross-pollination between family and creativity, and it's been so, for me, it's been so enriching, it's been and inspiring,
Well, I'd be remiss not to ask you about some classic time crisis stuff. And I imagine at home, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably eat pretty healthy.
Yeah, very.
You vegetarian or vegan?
Well, I was for about 5 years, and then I collapsed because I got chilled to the bone.
Wait. Meaning you physically collapsed?
Yeah, I couldn't get up out of bed one day. I've been a vegan for 5 years.
You felt paralyzed, or you felt
I couldn't walk.
so weak?
I couldn't walk.
Oh my God. What was going through your head? What did you think was happening?
Well, I'd suffered from bad back earlier in my year when I was younger. It was the middle of winter, and I'd been out for a walk the day before on top of one of the mountains, and I basically got chilled to the bone. And my circulation was so bad I couldn't warm up.
Like you were literally chilled to the bone.
I was literally chilled to the bone. It didn't matter how,
And did you have a feeling when you went to sleep that night, you were like, yeah, I was outside too much today? Or like,
I just felt exhausted and I didn't know what it was. And in the little Welsh town, it's quite an eccentric little place. This guy came around and he did emergency acupuncture. He's like a Chinese doctor. And he said, what do you eat? And I said, oh, I'm a vegan. And he laughed. He said, I came out here 15 years ago and I was a vegan. And he said, you won't last the winter. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, so it's really hard. I didn't know. It's especially hard for Welsh vegans.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing. So about 4 months later, I get my blood test done.
Yeah.
And I'm type O. And there's a whole train of thought about eating to your blood type. Are you aware?
Yes, I've heard about this. Yeah.
So blood O need protein. And they need, apparently, a bit of meat. And I was very reluctant. However, I was back out in Wales and I thought there's a local farm, organic, they humanely kept the lamb, and I had some roast lamb. I cooked some lamb and it was like this inner heat in me.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, okay, my body's telling me I actually need it. So basically what I am now is I'm essentially a vegan, but I now feel when I need some meat.
Yeah.
And what I do is I won't eat. I made the mistake, or maybe the good fortune, of reading that book by Eric Schlosser, Fast Food Nation.
Yes. Yeah.
I've never eaten meat in America since, apart from the places where you get a good organic or whatever.
Right.
But I'm very, very careful where I eat the meat. And so I'll have it occasionally.
And do you lean towards lamb? Because that's the thing people say is like, well, lambs, they don't factory farm lamb because there's less
lamb or
demand.
beef. Yeah, beef maybe. It's like a red meat. That's what they specifically say for typos. You can really, like, you just need that.
So you never, like, when's the last time you crushed some Doritos?
Well, I had probably Christmas.
Was that a Christmas present to yourself?
Yeah, here's the deal.
Did somebody get you the Doritos as a gift?
I think we had the equivalent of Doritos, they're like essentially tortilla chips, right?
Yes, except, and originally in the U.S., Doritos were just sold as tortilla chips, but now they're almost always flavored. Like, there's
like
Cool Ranch. Cool Ranch is
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the other thing. I don't know if you have ever heard of this thing called Candida.
Yes.
I had that for years. I had low energy, depression, and sort of chronic fatigue, if you like. Had it for years, and so much of it, I got ridiculous. 2006, it was ridiculous. I drive down to Oxford to rehearse, from London with Radiohead.
Yeah.
And it was an hour and a half, and we'd have, we were always well looked after. There's always lots of coffee and cake and stuff like that. And I'd load up on all of that stuff, all this sugary stuff. And I'd drive back at about 5:30 in the afternoon back to London, and I have to stop halfway for a sleep. My energy was so bad.
So tired, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, something wrong here. I went to see a functional medicine doctor, and he did blood tests, and he said, you've got Candida. You need, I'm not surprised. And he showed me my blood.
And there were no other symptoms, just the fatigue?
Fatigue, depression.
Yeah.
It's a really massive thing. So my whole tip since 2006 is trying to take out sugar, wheat, dairy, all that stuff. And, this is all well-trodden stuff, and I know a lot of it gets...
Right.
But it's had a profound effect on my energy. And I started doing these things as well, like every year in 2007 to 2012, every year I'd do a water fast where I would just drink water for 7 days, not eat anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Nothing but water for 7 days?
Nothing but water. I got.
Do you have like visions and stuff?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny.
Yeah?
So I picked up this book it was this old book someone gave me, and I opened up, and it was about staying in good health, and it opened up on the page on water fasting.
Like how old? Like
it's like 60 years old.
Uh-huh.
And when you realize, I come from a family of osteopaths and doctors, and my father's been very interested in osteopathy and in nutrition. And 80 years ago, if you went to osteopathic college in America, they taught you about nutrition. Everybody did fast. That was part of maintaining a good, healthy lifestyle. And people would fast, once a year or twice a year, particularly changing of seasons.
Right, and also almost every religion, including the very ancient ones, has some tradition of fasting.
Exactly. So I did this water fast, and the first 3 days, first of all, you realize that eating is kind of like a habit. It
just takes up time in the day too.
Yeah, it does. And then and I was like...
So what, you were just home off tour when you did this?
Yeah, I was in London. Third day, I'm like, I think I'm going to die. I'm feeling so bad. And I sort of literally get a cab because I'm craving being in nature. And the only nature in North London is Hampstead Heath. So I go to Hampstead Heath, and I literally walk from bench to bench, and I think, this is rubbish. I'm going to stop this. The next day, I wake up, and I'm awake and alive like I've never been before.
Right, you're like mentally sharp, right? That's a feature of it. Yeah.
But it was almost like that William Blake thing. I felt like the wonder of life. It was extraordinary. And I was like that 4 days. It's like, my only analogy was it's like taking ecstasy. It was literally that kind of high, and it was so interesting.
Feeling more connected to everything in nature.
Totally.
You have more like generosity of spirit.
Totally. And I had totally everything. And I went into the centre of London, and I'd walk around it, and I remember walking around and going, oh my God. Because you get these connections. I was like, your smell is so sensitive. And I'd smell, and I go, we're a society obsessed with eating and consumption because everything smells. You're like drawn in that, you walk past something, it smells. It's all about feed.
Yeah.
And so I thought, right, I'm going to do this every year. Second time I did it, next year, I was chasing that experience. You know, in life,
Similar to drugs, like
Exactly.
First time's so fun, second time's
second
pretty
time,
good. Yeah.
and it wasn't the same. And I was, you know, you get your ass kicked. You were chasing an experience, but it's so for me. What I'm trying to say is like how I eat now is I won't go to McDonald's to eat a burger if that's the only food. I don't need to eat, you know, because I know what that does to me. I know what that does to my energy. That just pulls me right down.
So I'm guessing you probably never had. Have you ever had any Cheetos, let alone Flamin' Hot Cheetos?
What are Cheetos?
Oh, you don't know what Cheetos are?
No, what are they?
They're made by Frito-Lay, who makes Fritos.
Oh,
and
I know
Lays and Mon-
Fritos,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's the same company. And Cheetos,
Curly things.
It's a puffed corn thing that's with orange cheese around it. And their mascot is Chester Cheetah. He's a cheetah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, like you must have your.
We had
equivalent.
we had
you have
ones
weird
called,
stuff like Monster Munch.
Yeah,
and
Monster.
stuff, right?
We had Whatsits.
Okay, that's probably.
And they were the cheesy ones, and they're Whatsits. They melt in your mouth, and that was the advert, you know. And they were the same kind of. That's right, Monster Munch, pickled onion Monster Munch.
Crunchy texture.
Yeah, really crunchy.
Yeah, so these are cheesy, and then there's these ones flamin' hot that. It's actually an interesting story. It was the guy who was initially a janitor at Frito-Lay.
Yeah.
He had this idea to make them spicier. Yeah. And now he's like kind of this legend. There's going to be a movie about him. His name's Richard Montañez.
What's your fascination with this? What?
I mean, a big part of it's the story, just because it's such an unusual story, and he's like a very inspiring guy. But also, I think on the show, a lot of our fascination with foods, stuff related to food, is the advertising element.
Right.
Because the truth is, on our show, we're not particularly like foodies.
Yeah.
It's always more about the cultural, almost like sociological aspect of like these foods that everybody has that are marketed and sold to us and become part of our lives. That's like the more interesting part than the food itself.
Yeah, for sure.
We should probably wrap it up, but yeah, thanks so much for coming through. And
thank you, Ezra.
yeah, great having you.
Cheers, man.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.